Hello, everyone. My name is Casey Lou Waiters, and I am the podcast manager at Goodie Nation. And you are tuned into Why Relationships Matter in the Innovation Economy. So, what is Goodie Nation? Goodie Nation is an organization that exists to eliminate the relationship gap for so many deserving founders. And we do that in several ways. We facilitate cohort style learning, we provide resources and mentorship. But one of the ways that we do that that's a little more casual is by making sure that we are engaging some of the dopest founders, investors, VCs, folks in the innovation space who are willing to share their stories about how they got to where they are today. And that is what Why Relationships Matter is all about. So, on today's episode, we actually have a special guest. All of our guests are special guests, but we have one of our Goodie Nation board members who is here to share some insights into how relationship building has influenced his career. So, hi, Kirk. Welcome to the show.
Casey, what's going on? It's good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, first question, classic question. I would love for you to share your origin story. How did you end up where you are today?
Well, we could be here for 2 days, but we're gonna condense this thing down. So I always like to start the story that most people jokingly say they've never met a person of color from Omaha, Nebraska. Well, now you have. That's actually where I was born. My dad was in the Air Force. My mom was living in Omaha, Nebraska at the time. They got married. That's where I was born. And my dad was one of the first corporate executives with 3M. And that moved us around from Omaha to Rochester, New York, to Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, and then to St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I grew up. And in very different upbringing in that in majority of the schools that I went to, up until I went to Florida A&M University, I was in predominantly white schools. So I was definitely in the minority. And in many instances, in an entire school, there were maybe 6 to 7 Black kids and kids of color in elementary school, middle school. And then what was interesting is in high school, in junior high, there was a desegregation program. So kids from the city were coming out to my school in Chesterfield, in the suburbs of Missouri, St. Louis. And so, I was always looking for ways to fit in and get to know my culture and my people, and especially because I didn't see it so much. And what started this journey, I didn't know back then, in St. Louis, there was a program called the Minority Youth Entrepreneurship Program. It was a partnership of Black entrepreneurs in St. Louis with Washington University, and 30 students were selected to be part of that program. And that is where I first experienced and got to know a lot of entrepreneurs, very prominent entrepreneurs in St. Louis. That program also is how I really learned about HBCUs, because at a lot of the predominantly white schools I attended, HBCUs weren't talked about. In St. Louis, it wasn't like a Howard or FAMU or Morehouse or Spelman or Hampton. You just didn't hear the names in these schools that often. And so it was from there, through a relationship, that I was well known. I got well known in the Minority Youth Entrepreneurship Program. I met somebody that introduced me to Florida A&M University, sold me on it. That's how I ended up at Florida A&M University, through a relationship and being around the right circle of people. And then I attended FAMU, graduated in the business school. My first job, and every job I ever got, I got through networking. And so I ended up in the pharmaceutical and biotech sector. And 3 jobs in, I ended up at a Japanese pharmaceutical startup company called Takeda Pharmaceuticals, was one of the first employees there, and was there for the ride to be at that company when we had no product, to launching a product and reaching $1 billion in sales in 17 months. So an incredible ride, but you enjoy it, because as many things unfortunately come to an end, I was let go from that position. But the guy that was the vice president of the time, a guy named Dean Hart, he went to a nanotechnology startup. He needed to pick one person to build this company with. And out of all the people he hired, again, remind you that he helped build this company from scratch, pretty much, hired all the employees. He actually had done something very similar at a previous company. He had to pick one person. I was at that time the second or third highest ranking African American in one of the fastest growing pharmaceutical companies in the world. I had helped start a diversity recruitment initiative from FAMU. So the first HBCU-based internship program or college-based internship program, as well as interns in the field and in the home office. And so anyway, I ended up going to work with Dean, and then was in the nanotechnology world. Didn't even know that world existed. But as in many times you look at this opportunity, somebody put you on, went, and it was just an incredible opportunity. And let me just back up. I bypassed something about my story. So when I left Takeda and when I got let go, it was a very challenging time because I was extremely visible. So I was the second or third highest ranking African American in the company. I had 100 people reporting to me, and I thought I was the man. And so I didn't know that at the time, talking about relationships, that I had all of my networking relationship eggs in one basket, all within the company that I worked for. And so when I left, it was a rude awakening to realize that people I had promoted, people that I had put on, some people that actually worked for me would no longer return my phone call after I left the company. No, now that I could do nothing for them, I was no longer, deemed worthy to return their phone call or even ask for a letter of endorsement, recommendation, all of that. So I just remember specifically, I will never let that happen. So it just so happened that my next job position with Dean Hart, who hired me, called me out the blue, networking, I landed that job. And all these other opportunities came to me. And through unfortunate incidences, because many times when you get let go from a company or a company closes down, which was the case with the startup, you're like, okay, I don't have to deal with those people anymore. But having learned what I went through at Takeda, you make the most of everything. You make lemonade out of lemons. And so I learned about networking, built a really good network internationally. And so within a week of me getting from a week of Nano Inc. closing, we were told on a Tuesday that the doors would close on Friday. No correlation to our performance. Is one of those fluke things that our investor pulled their funding and filed bankruptcy to protect themselves. Our company was a part of that bankruptcy. And even though the company just disappeared, I ended up getting a consulting gig that pretty much almost replaced my income from a gentleman that was running a business in Austria. He actually flew me to Austria to go work with him. I then ended up getting offered to be an interim CEO of a drug discovery company out of Florida State. And that didn't pay, but it was a great opportunity to learn something and a new skill set that I didn't learn. And as you always hear me talk about networking, I wanted to expand my network, but it was through that act that I was introduced to someone at Georgia Tech's incubator, the Advanced Technology Development Center. And I ended up getting vetted to be a mentor, and then from mentor, part-time, full-time. And again, I didn't have to interview for the job. I was asked and courted, and I ended up raising the money to launch the healthcare program at Georgia Tech's incubator. And that opened up this world. That is through that I actually met Joey Womack. Later on, kind of find out he's a fellow FAMUan. But that, I can look back and see how all these stories are connected, and they're all connected through people. And whether the circumstances were favorable for me or unfavorable, whether you get a new job because somebody puts you on, or your company closes for whatever reason, I went through 4 of those. But even every time I got put on and was introduced or basically welcomed to a new opportunity, it all happened through people. And the more I expanded my network, the more opportunities that I have. And now as an entrepreneur, I've been able to build a 6-7 figure business solely based upon relationships. And so as I look at my journey from corporate, working in corporations or corporate America, to academia at an incubator, then working for multiple startups, and now as an entrepreneur myself, I can tell you I am the poster child for understanding how important relationships are. They are critical, especially as an underrepresented business owner, founder, entrepreneur. Relationships are the key, and that is what has sustained me from high school all the way through where I am right now as an entrepreneur and owner of my own business. So that is my origin story.
Whoa. Like, that was like this big epic thing that somehow all roads lead to Joey. So I mean, like all the things that you said about no matter what the situation was, whether it was a good situation, a not great situation, networking is what led you to your next opportunity. And so I know for a lot of people, networking is kind of like this nebulous thing. Like we know we have to do it. You got to go to the mixer and go to your coffees, but that's just like what you do. Do
Right.
you find that you have particular like strategies for networking, or is it purely about just getting to know people for you?
That's a great question. And as I, wear the shirt literally and wrote a book about it last year, my book, Networking, The Path to Profit, Promotions, and Power, I find that networking is the art, I call it the art and science of intentional relationship building. And as you're intentional about things, there are goals. And so when you go to a networking event, what I find is networking events, conferences, company meetings, where you have clusters of people in one place at one time. I strongly feel that those end up being some of the most wasted opportunities because people aren't intentional. And so when you go to a conference, when you go to a networking event, you should have a goal. So if you're a founder and your goal is to raise money, you should have an idea of who you want to talk to, how many people you want to talk to. You should have an idea of how to pitch yourself. What collateral will you use? And what I also will say is the foundation of networking, contrary to what most people believe, is actually giving. And when I coach people and I talk about, I work with some of my clients that I work with, specifically around networking, how that leads into things like enterprise sales. One of the first things I do is not only talk about your mission, what it is you want to accomplish in terms of your goal for networking, but helping people understand their superpowers and their strengths. Because some people don't like networking because they think they have nothing of value to offer. And that is absolutely true. We all are, no matter what your religion is, I'm a Christian. And so I believe that God made us in his image. God gave us all these special gifts. God gave us people that are in our circles that have value. We all have value, but many people just think, oh, nobody wants to speak with me because I'm just a DJ, or nobody wants to speak with me because I'm just a stay-at-home mom, or nobody wants to speak with me because I'm boring, I'm an introvert. That is the farthest from the truth. And when I sit down and I meet with people, seeing the confidence in their eyes, in their face, to help them understand that you have value in this world. And when you know how to articulate it and verbalize it, and saying that I'm not just an accountant, I am somebody that makes magic with numbers and helps people free up their freedom, right? So there's a different story that you can tell other than saying I'm a CPA or I'm an accountant. I'm just using it as an example. So I think one, knowing how to tell your story, knowing that you have superpowers and skills, and learning how to articulate that, and knowing the value you have to give. And sometimes it's not about you, it's about the people you have in your network. And you meet people and you might say, you know what? You should meet Casey. Casey's dope. Casey produces podcasts. I know you want to do a podcast. Let me make sure I introduce you. That is what networking is about. And so it's not always going someplace with the intent of getting something. Is going places and thinking about how you can generally give value to people. And even if you're a startup founder, you are giving value to people. There are things that you're doing in your company and the nature of your being that brings value to people. So just being intentional about how people articulate that, and look at networking not as this esoteric floating in the sky thing that people dread. It is being genuinely curious about other people, and intentional and strategic about how you make relationships, how you keep relationships, how you cultivate relationships, and how you activate relationships. Because all those things you should do all the way through your entire life, because it's not, networking isn't always about business. Networking helps you, may help your kid get into Woodward Academy, may help your kid get into some other private school, may help you get to the front of the line and a concert or something like that. There's also a lot of fun to it as well. But I believe there is a method to the madness, but the foundation of networking is learning what you have of value and how you articulate that and position yourself to give as much value as you can to other people. And the analogy I use, it's like every time you build a relationship, you basically plant a seed. And the more seeds you plant, the more chances you have something that will grow. And especially as you cultivate those seeds, you water them, you get some sunlight on them, give them a little sunshine. Those seeds grow into fruit that you will be able to partake in later on down the life. And I'll be very honest, networking is not quid pro quo. It's not you do something for me, I do something for you. Because there are times myself, I'll talk about me, where I give, I don't always get return. But again, if I give, meaning I plant enough seeds throughout my life consistently, it comes back to you 10, 100-fold. And I don't mind talking about my faith, but if I give, I act like I'm giving to God, and God will arrange. And some people say the universe will conspire to give back to you, but I know God will find his way to give it back to me. So that's why I believe no matter what your discipline is, what field you have, introvert, extrovert, ambivert, doesn't matter. Networking is the job you never quit.
Amazing. And yes, we love the dropping the little alchemist gem. If you know, you know. Okay, so on this seed and growth metaphor, you mentioned that you were vetted to be a mentor for ATDC. What about the opposite? Who are some of the mentors, either past or present, that you like off top of mind are like, man, that advice they gave me was the thing, or they just listened to me when I need to vent? How has mentorship, being a mentee, that relationship sort of affected your journey?
Oh, I mean, significant. Back to one of my first jobs in high school, and so I told you that story, my story, how I got here, but I can point to specific people that mentored me and sewed into me that were instrumental in my career. My first one, I still stay in touch with her. She was my manager when I sold clothes in high school. Her name is Kim Jessup. Shout out to Kim if you ever see this. But she instilled excellence in me and held me at a standard commensurate with what my dad was a strict disciplinarian, but Kim held me to that standard. And I remember when I was learning sales, she was like, Kirk, I want to tell you that people aren't white or black or brown, they're green. And your goal is to connect with them and build a relationship so they trust you, not just because you're trying to sell them something, but they trust you, your opinion, because you are going to become an expert in learning clothes. So that's how I also learned that no matter what position you have, be the best at it, because your reputation will speak for itself. So I learned that from Kim. One of my first corporate mentors, the guy, his name is Tony Shaw. He was my manager at J&J. He became my mentor because my first conversation with him, he almost had to fire me. So he was one of the guys that told me a lot about, just because we have a difficult conversation, it's up to you to figure out how to change it. And he ended up instilling in me the business acumen that helps me know how to really look at business, understand numbers, and translate numbers to messaging, and also the epitome of professionalism and professional excellence and professional polish is what I call it. So he's another one. He's the reason why I went to J&J over to Takeda, and just an exemplary role model for me that sowed life into me still to this day, still a friend of mine. And another person is Dean Hart. So that was the guy that was vice president of Takeda that brought me over to Nano Inc. And that was my first time being exposed to intimately working with the C-suite. So he helped show me from running a $1 billion pharmaceutical company, the marketing strategy, your leadership and how you think about leveraging different tools to build brands. So when he was at Nano Inc., it was one big company. We broke it up into 4 divisions, and I helped run 2 of those divisions. So he taught me a lot about high-level business acumen from the C-suite, and then allowing me to spend time with CFOs to hear how they talk and they think about the numbers. the CEO and also the chief technical officer. And then there are other people. I'll pick on a guy named Drew Lanham. He's the guy that really, I met him at ATDC. He is the CEO of a startup company that spun out of ATDC. But he's the guy that taught me a lot about venture capital. He was new to ATDC, and I remember that was one skill set I didn't have. And I asked him, and he gave me the playbook. He put me on. And so that also helped me learn how to operate when I went to go work at the Engaged Venture Fund for 2.5 years. And so I have very specific people from different disciplines that I've allowed, because you have to be coachable, right? To be able to learn these different skill sets and tools and life parts of your life journey. And all these people were allowed to sow into me, but I also sought them. So I believe as a mentee, you should also be passionate about your own development. And if there are things that you want, surround yourself with those people. Proactively go find them. That's also part of networking. And there's a famous quote that I love to say by Jim Rohn. And he says that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So if you're a C student, you're going to remain a C student. If you keep hanging out with C students. So hang out with A students. And so that's one thing that I intentionally did, is I sought people that were where I want to be. And those are examples of people that have sown into my life.
Wow. You speak about networking as if you've written a book about it or something.
Something like that.
I mean, a little bit. So for anyone who's listening to this, who's like, man, I too would like to learn to be a master networker. How can people find you? How can they find your work? What's the best way for them to do that?
Most definitely appreciate that. So you can check me out. My website is IamKirkBarnes.com. Same Instagram handle at IamKirkBarnes on IG. You can check me out on LinkedIn as well. It's Kirk Barnes. It's just simple. And then I'm also on YouTube. You can see a lot of my content at I Am Kirk Barnes on YouTube. And if you go on Amazon.com and look for networking Kirk Barnes, you'll find my book. Please go check it out. It pretty much chronicles my journey and gives you some nuggets to help you know how to navigate talking to anyone, anytime, anywhere.
Amazing. Well, I hope that everyone listening to this, I mean, that gem about networking is about giving first, not just trying to figure out what you're trying to get. That definitely resonated with me. And so, yeah, we love to hear y'all's thoughts if you have any. And of course, if you have any questions or want to reach out to Kirk, he just told you how to do it. And so thank you so much for joining us on yet another episode of Why Relationships Matter. And as the Goodie Nation founder, Joey Womack, always says, stay magnetic and outwork yesterday. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Casey.